I'll start over. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so very much for joining us for tonight's installment of the Alumni Bear Talk series. I'm going to take a few moments now to introduce our guest speaker for this evening. So bear with me while I do that. And thank you again so very much for joining us. So Noah is a fundraiser for political candidates and justice-focused causes. He's recently led a $70 million national initiative and a super PAC supporting Joe Biden. Before his current efforts, he worked for two of the country's top political fundraising firms, raised funds for statewide and local campaigns, and led the mid-level donor team at ACLU in San Francisco. So that is a very short bio, but I will allow our presenter tonight to give you more of his background and history as it relates to voices in our democracy. And again, thank you very much for joining us. And this presentation is being recorded. So now I'll turn it over to our speaker for tonight.
Cool. The pleasure is mine, and we will probably do some things a little bit more unorthodoxly since there's such a small crowd here. So I'm not going to blather too much. But so my name is Noah, graduated from Mercer, class of 2013. My degree was in Women's and Gender Studies and Consumer Behavior. I was in Women's and Gender Studies with Annie Biggs, who is on the call and has been very successful in her own right. So look her up afterwards and make her famous. What I have started doing, well, first of all, what I started doing at Mercer right out of high school was getting involved very quickly and very directly with a bunch of the different clubs and organizations that make Mercer so special. So this was QuadWorks, this was Common Ground, the Gay Straight Alliance. This was all of the different women's and gender studies programs that they have to offer. And dabbled in most of the clubs and organizations and to some degree. Never joined a fraternity, but then ended up joining a fraternity after I graduated. So I think I've checked almost every box. And what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit about involvement, but I also wanted to tell you the story of how I got from Mercer to getting involved in political work to getting involved in now national work and finally having just elected Joe Biden. I'm not a super great public speaker, so forgive me for any hesitations and stutters. I will do the very best that I can. But I would love to ask also if you feel comfortable doing so. I think this is a no judgment zone here. We're all pandemic COVID 2019, but if you feel comfortable being on camera, I would love to see you and know who I'm talking to, because right now I'm just talking to Dr. Booker. And what I would love to do over the course of today is tell you a little bit about what I do and tell you a little bit about how you can run for office or encourage your friends to run for office and what that process is like. So different from what we had talked about initially, Dr. Booker, but I'm pivoting because I think this new thing is way more fun. So with that being said, I'd like to start with your permission, Dr. Booker. And I don't know how to say your name, Ms. Crouch. Would you tell me how to say your first name?
It's Kelsey.
Kelsey,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Super nice to meet you. Kelsey, I'm going to go use you and Dr. Booker since you're both the people that I see on video. And I want to give you both the same advice that I would give a candidate who's running for office for the first time. That doesn't mean that you have to run for office, of course, although I would highly, highly encourage you to do that. But I do want to talk about what it means to run for office and how Mercer prepared me to now help other people do this for a living. Is that okay with you, Dr. Booker? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. I couldn't hear your question because my internet isn't.
Is that okay with you if we do that?
I'm sorry, I missed that part.
If we spend this talk learning how Mercer prepared me to help other people run for office and helping you and Kelsey run for office when you.
Oh, okay, sure.
Let's start with you because Kelsey's still in school, and although it's possible to run for office and get elected while you're still in school, it's much harder.
I actually do work at Mercer. I'm out of school.
See, tell me everything. Okay, what do you do at Mercer?
I work in the alumni office.
What do you do in the alumni office?
I am the coordinator of alumni services, which is a large umbrella of responsibilities.
Oh, spectacular. Okay, so you're both running for office then. Okay, so I've talked to Dr. Booker too much. We're going to start with you, Kelsey.
Okay.
Dr. Crouch, Kelsey?
Oh, no doctor, just a MA. So just Kelsey is fine.
Congratulations on skipping out on those student loans. Kelsey, so do you live in Macon?
I do.
Okay. So in Macon, let's pick an office. There's a couple different things you could run for in Macon, and I ran Robert Rickart's race in Macon, Georgia. So I'm vaguely familiar, but I think things have changed a little bit too. Let's pick something. City council, so county council, mayor, water commissioner. Is a couple different things. State rep, state senator that you could do locally. Any of those sound fun?
Personally, none of those sound fun, but for the purpose of this exercise, let's go with city council.
Perfect. Okay, city council is a great one. One of the things that I did when I started at Mercer was kind of walked into Bear Fair, which I think still exists. I hope still exists. And looked around and saw that there was a lot of stuff, and it just felt very, very overwhelming because I wasn't sure exactly where I fit in or who I wanted to be. And so I ended up just having to pick something. And I think people kind of go one of two different directions. They either don't do anything, or they like get tangentially involved in everything and then just quit a bunch of different organizations when they get too overwhelmed. I was the person who got involved in everything and then quit a bunch when things got too overwhelming. And I think running for office is similar. There are tons of different things that you can do to be involved in politics in some capacity. Running for office is just one. You could volunteer on a campaign. You could go out and vote. You can raise money from your friends and family. You can encourage your friends and family to go and vote. You can do what they call persuasion, which is talking to the Republicans if you're a Democrat, or talking to the Democrats if you're a Republican, on Twitter and Facebook all day long and try to persuade them that you're right and they're wrong. That is not very effective, as you may know, but people do it. And there are better ways to persuade people too. But there's many, many, many ways to get involved. The reason I encourage people, especially women, to run for office is because I believe running for office is the single greatest way for an individual to make an impact in this country. Here's what I mean. You can give a little bit of money to a cause, and that cause can go out and make a difference. You can dedicate your life to a nonprofit or a service or developing students. But so Kelsey, like alumni services, how many alumni do you think you talk to or serve? I know you serve the whole of the alumni, but I'm sure they also have, you're not the single person in charge of all of the alumni and all of the services. So like, give me kind of like a ballpark. Are we talking about 5,000?
Well, Mercer has more than 80,000 alumni. I say the professional schools usually deal directly with their own alumni. For example, pharmacy. So I say mostly I deal with our 50th year class and above, which we call the Half Century Club. They are very active. They are very sweet. They are very, very outspoken. So I talk to them a lot during the week.
Wonderful. May we all be there one day.
Yes.
So how many people are you thinking are in that half century and above? Just, I'm not going to hold you to it. Just kind of ballpark.
Gosh, you put me on the spot. So I hope my supervisor isn't watching.
No,
I'd say our 50th class of 1970, we had almost 300. So I would guess probably about 2,000.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So 2,000 people, which is huge impact. Your professional job, your 9 to 5, has impact on 2,000 people in some capacity, and certainly many more people. As you know, as you talk to people on staff, and they talk to other people, and they encourage their children, grandchildren, great grandchildren to come to Mercer. The city of Macon, or the county of Macon-Bibb, because of course it is incorporated now. I'm looking it up as we speak. I was going to pick a number, but I remember that number is old. We're talking about 153,000 people. And it's only governed by, I believe it's still 6 county representatives on the city council. And those 6 people are often at odds with each other, and often it's a 3-3 split. So you have a lot of power as an elected official and somebody who can vote. Thanks, Annie. You have a lot of power as an elected official to impact that. So this is why I encourage you to run, because not only can you impact one little aspect of these people's lives, you can impact every aspect of people's lives. Now, you said earlier to me that none of these sound appealing to you. I'm going to make a case, but I want to hear from you first, because I believe you right now, and everybody who's watching this recorded is going to have that same experience. There are a lot of people who don't want to run for office, and they don't have to. There are many other ways to make a difference. But sometimes these hesitations are more for us than they are for the general public. So tell me about your personal hesitations, why this sounds like your idea of a nightmare.
Where do I start is probably the better question. I always describe myself as an introvert. And that's not to say that we are somehow less qualified to step up to something in that position. But I work so much better on a one-on-one basis or of very small groups, which again wouldn't really exclude me from any of these qualifications. But the idea of public speaking and being on, I guess, just constant energy, constantly. And I think those kind of things prevent me from that. I have very passionate political views. So I think I contribute. I hope I contribute in a meaningful way, just really not the public office way.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask Dr. Booker the same question. Dr. Booker, why haven't you run for office yet?
I'm doing small incremental change here because I just transitioned into this job right now. So right now, to be honest, my plate is full. Mm-hmm. So that would be something if I were to get involved into politics again. I tried my hand at a small office post seat, but I had to resign it with my new job. But again, that might be something I'll get into later on in life. When I have a little bit more time on my hand. Something that I'll probably be more passionate about would probably be school board, because I have my degrees in higher education. I worked a lot with federal TRIO programs that serviced 13 counties including Macon-Bibb County for 10 years through those services. And my mom was an educator for 40 years. My aunt was for 30. So I'm definitely passionate about education. So if I was to run, it would probably lean more to something like the school board.
Amazing. And
I think you would be great at that, Dr. Booker.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I do too. And I think you both hit the nail on the head. The reason why a lot of people don't run for office is usually 2 different reasons, and you hit both of them. Number one is my personality isn't exactly suited for this for whatever reason. It's the reason that I'm not going to run for office. My personality is really good at running for office. I have like the best personality for running for office. I'm super charismatic, high energy, blah, 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 blah. I know this. I also know that I would be a terrible elected official. Why? Because I don't really care that much about what happens after people get in. I'm a very competitive person. I love the winning and the losing, but I don't think I'd service constituents very well. I just don't. And I've done that job for a little while as somebody's chief of staff in St. Louis, and people would call and say, oh, the grass is too long in my neighbor's yard. And I'd say, I don't know, cut it. What do you want me to do? you know, I'm just not that person. And I think that's okay. We have to know what our limits are as people. Now, what I will say is that some of the best elected officials I know do not have this big bombastic personality that we think about when we think about politicians. Because there are 500,000 elected officials in the United States, and very few of them you've heard of. And the ones you've heard of are running for president, they're senators, they're congressmen, they're out there, they're big, they're bold. In a lot of cities and counties, like the librarian is elected. You know, there's mentioned school board. There's a room for amazing, deep, thoughtful, careful, empathetic, compassionate people to make a difference as an elected official. And a lot of times it's the campaigning that they don't like, as opposed to being the elected official. Especially for small offices, campaigning is a tiny part of it. And being the official is the real work. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you can, Kelsey, run for something that would be well suited to your personality, you should do it. But of course, you should never try to pretend to be something that you're not. And there are many ways for you to help in a non-elected capacity, especially if you can be the behind the scenes person, getting one of these bombastic people to go out if they agree with the issues that you care about. And sometimes that's just as effective, if not more effective. Dr. Booker, you absolutely have the personality to hold elected office. There's no question in Kelsey and I in our minds.
I think it's the talkativeness, but again, what's going to probably get me in trouble is that my facial expressions need to be delivered. And then I could see myself being like you saying, well, let's just go cut the grass. You know what I mean? Like, with bigger things, bigger fish to fry. You know what I mean? So,
you remind me very much of there are many of my favorite politicians, because you can express something but still keep yourself composed. You don't have to worry about your facial expressions at all. But time is huge. Time is huge. This is the big reason why good people don't run for office. And it's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I'm a political fundraiser. So my job is specifically to raise money for candidates. And often it's for candidates who have no idea where the money is going to come from. And they have no idea how to get the word out there. And so my job is to, and they don't have the time to raise it. And what ends up happening is really wealthy people just write themselves a check and get the elected office. Or people who have a lot of time on their hands, often lawyers, who have flexible calendars and can kind of make their own hours at their law firm, can go out and raise the money that they need to raise. Real estate is another example of a profession like this, where people have a lot of time flexibility and can make their own hours. It's difficult for teachers, firefighters, salaried university employees to get out there and do this kind of work. My message to you is, if you do it efficiently and you do it well, there is a way to run for office and be busy and be parents and be all of the other things too. But it doesn't mean you don't have to sacrifice something. You always sacrifice something. It's not one of these like, oh, you can have it all. You can't. You do have to end up making some choices. So if you find yourself in the position where you can make those choices, what you would do, most of the politicians' time is spent fundraising. 70% of the politicians' time is spent fundraising. That's why I feel comfortable talking about time. Hi, Poppy. There are steps to fundraising that also apply when you have to ask for anything else in your life. And since it's just the three of us, I'm sure people recording will want this too. I will tell you the steps to fundraising, but I will also tell you how to apply them to your life as a non-political person who might end up one day being engaged in politics, or maybe just asking for a raise, or asking your students to do something like this, or asking your alumni to do something like this. It's the same process. I assume I'm not allowed to swear since Mercer is still a Baptist school, but it's PQAC the F up is the acronym that I use to remember this. Prospecting, qualifying, asking, getting commitments, thank yous, follow-ups, and upgrades. And this is all I do all day long. Rinse, wash, repeat over and over and over again. It's all the development department does. They might not call it that. I assume they don't call it that, but it's all they do all day long. So prospecting, you have to know who you're about to talk to. And that could be, so in voting, of course, that's easy, voters. In raising money, it's a little trickier. You need to talk to people who actually have a little bit of money to give you. It doesn't have to be a lot, $20, $50, $100. But if there's a choice between buying dinner for themselves and giving you money for your campaign, they should definitely pick buying dinner for themselves. So that's, let's be realistic about the situation that some people are in. And I think this is true. I assume this is true, Dr. Booker, for example, I'm going to pick on you again, but of your equity and inclusion practices, there are probably people who come to you, and there are probably people who don't. And those don'ts are really important. I would argue even more important sometimes than the people who are proactively coming to you. Those are prospects.
Yeah, and I, in my work, we tend to call those individuals the movable middle, or sometimes those are the ones that are like, they can't easily be persuaded, to listen to things about diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice. So, like you said, those are very important, and sometimes I have to exhaust most of my energy and resources to not necessarily convince, but at least engage, or trying to openly engage them without some forcible action or mandates.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, absolutely makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's always nice when people go to the mandated programs, but it's kind of disheartening when they don't show up if they're not going to get a T-shirt or a free dinner, or, and then that movable day. How many people are actually paying attention when they're in the programs, or are they there because they have to sign in or check a box? Yeah, those are prospects for sure. Okay, so then you also hit the next thing. So it's not just, so prospects might be students. But then the next one, qualifying, is what you discussed, the movable middle. I look at my list of students and I say, there are some people I'm just going to write off. I was about to be careful about what I was saying, but I'm not going to be careful what I say because I'm not a Mercer employee. You can be careful about what you say. This is me. If the guy that I'm trying to talk about racial justice with has a Confederate flag tattoo on one arm and a swastika on the other, I wouldn't consider him part of the movable middle. I would say he's probably, somebody else might take care of him, but not the middle, certainly. I think far right, we can pretty clearly say. And I went to school with somebody like this, so I know they're at Mercer. Okay, so they're the far right. We're not going to worry about them. He's a hedge fund manager now. He's doing very well. Him and his swastika tattoo. The movable middle, who's in the movable middle?
Usually those are the ones that, can be either swayed either way, right? They can be either swayed to a more progressive view or a more conservative view, depending on who's in front of them speaking and giving them anecdotal data or things of that nature to help, kind of persuade them to either or.
Perfect.
Or maybe also people who aren't informed, like they don't actually know what's going on.
That's
so
good.
they're neutral.
Mm-hmm. Same thing is true of voting. Same thing is true of money raising. The qualifying is the process by which we decide, and it should be a process by which we decide who we're talking to and who we're just kind of leaving alone for right now. Then you come to the ask. And the ask is different depending on what you're trying to accomplish, but most asks have similarities. So I'll tell you my asking process for money, and you may be able to apply it to your situation. It could be asking people to come to an event. It could be asking people to vote for you. It could be asking people for a raise, like asking one individual for a raise. But I think the process kind of works the same way. So here it is. Number one, you are telling them why you're doing what you're doing. Always starting with the why is the easiest possible thing to do, because even if they disagree with it, they'll understand that you're coming from a heart place, not necessarily like a beating you down head place. So if I was running for office, I would say, or Joe Biden. So Joe Biden is running for president because he wants to restore dignity to the White House. Okay. I mean, I don't know if that's what he wants to do, but it sounds reasonable enough. That's why. That's why you're doing it. The next one is the one that people skip the most, but it's the most important one, especially if you're asking for a raise. Why it's viable, what you're asking for, why that thing is viable. The number one reason people give, sorry, let me rephrase. The number one reason people give to campaigns, it's not because they like the policies, it's not because they like the person, it's because they think that candidate will win. And so you'll see candidates do this all the time. Losing candidates will say, oh, we're virtually tied. Well, yeah, but you're not tied. You're virtually tied. It's not the same thing. Candidates who are winning by 1 point will say they're winning by 10 points. You can do it without lying. You can tell the truth, and you can say this program is going to exist for a long time. We have existed for a long time. My work at the ACLU, they would do this really easily because they've been around for 100 years. They'd say, oh, we've been around for 100 years. Dr. Booker, you can say we've transformed the lives of X number of students. Kelsey, you can say with your alumni that over X number of alumni have come through your program and have had meaningful connection with Mercer. You can even say literally, if you go back and look or ask the development department, hey, run a list, like my list compared to your list, how much money are these people actually bringing in? I bet it's significant. So you have, this is the viability. It's almost always a statistic, but it's like one thing where you're like, this is for real. I'm doing amazing things. If you're running for office, it's I'm going to knock on doors. How many doors have I knocked on? Where am I in the polls? Prospect qualify. The ask. Viability. Oh, then the best one. Would you consider making a personal commitment to give X amount of money by Y date? Would you consider giving me a raise of 5% in the next quarter? Would you consider coming to this event, coming to one event in January, February, or March? It's would you consider doing the thing that I want you to do, which is always as specific as you can, by a date. And the reason why you start with would you consider is because if they say no, then you get to follow up with, well, what would you consider? It's the most beautiful way to ask for something because it takes you off the hook because whenever we ask for anything real, we are making ourselves vulnerable. We're at this psychological place where everything comes into effect all at once, the spotlight effect, imposter syndrome, all of our shame or guilt around money, or all of our shame or guilt around other people, maybe guilt for not having enough, guilt for having too much. All of these psychological factors come into play in that one little moment of an ask. When I train candidates, I ask them to go to Starbucks and ask for a 15% discount on their coffee. Would you consider giving me a 15% discount on my coffee today? Why? I'm a nice guy. You're a nice guy. I like your haircut. Can I have 15% off? And almost always they say no.
I was just like, does that work? Because if so, let me practice it tomorrow.
But you know what? Every time I shop, I ask for a discount. Because
I mean, I do too, but I know that was training me for a campaign.
It absolutely is.
You already have the skill set.
I do. If not, I always have a coupon in my purse.
Good thinking. Always ask. You never know. And sometimes I just ask for a nice guy discount. But it's not about the discount. It's about the asking process and getting used to asking for what you want, because we don't teach people how to ask in this culture. We have to learn how to ask. And some of us learn by fighting for it. And some of us learn just because we have the good grace of somebody else to teach us. But we don't ask for what we want from our families. How many times have we done things out of obligation on Thanksgiving dinner that we didn't really want to do, or have just because we didn't really feel comfortable asking for what we actually wanted? Yeah, asking is so important. And it's not just about politics. It's about anything. So that's my format. Would you consider doing this specific thing by this specific date? If not, what would you consider? Then the most important part, saying thank you, and then the follow-ups. Yeah, that's how to ask. And I think that applies to all sorts of things. And it's part of what I learned at Mercer is how to put some of these pieces together. I think Mercer, as a liberal arts school in the South, dealing with an incredibly diverse student population, and in some ways a not at all diverse student population, has really, really, really good opportunity to shift people's minds in a way that bends them towards justice, bends them towards generosity, bends them towards building community and being compassionate to each other. I very clearly and obviously fight for Team Blue. There are other people who fight for Team Red, and I wish them the best. But I think one of the great benefits of doing the work that I do is I get to make the world a kinder, nicer place, a place with more integrity. And the work that we do with everybody at Mercer, be it political, apolitical, is to make the world a better place, a nicer place, a kinder place. I had the great fortune when I was working for an innovation company in Silicon Valley to have a group of MBA students from Mercer come and visit me. And I gave them the tour of the place and got to teach them all the cool stuff going on, all the Silicon Valley bouncy balls and spinny walls and the whole thing. And it was great and it was super fun. But the best part about it was helping MBA students realize that life is about slightly more than spreadsheets. Life's about creativity and fun and bouncing ideas off of each other. And if you give them the choice between hiring somebody who's empathetic and hiring somebody who's good at one particular technical thing, I'm going to hire the person with empathy every single time. So this is a lot of me rambling. I know that I'm just talking to you two, but I appreciate you giving me the patience in the audience for letting me do this. If you decide to run or help somebody run, the most important thing that you can do, and the thing that one of the things that Mercer taught me how to do, is to put disparate ideas together. Politicians especially have a lot of trouble with this because they're under so much pressure, and people just don't realize the pressure that they're under. They're under tremendous pressure, and every bad word, every bad decision, every weird face they make when they're eating a taco can end up on the front page of a newspaper somewhere. And it's just hard. But almost always there are people who are doing it because they care about the community. Republicans and Democrats, they're doing it because they care about the community and they want what's best for the community. So it's our job as people who love them, or as the politicians themselves, to put all of the different ideas that we learn at places like Mercer together, to put the great books, to put the science, to put whatever together with the engagement that something like QuadWorks provides, with the engagement that being an RA provides, with the chaos control that being an RA provides. And what we learn from our professors, what we learn from our teachers, what we learn from the staff, and shaping that into the future that we actually want to see in the world. So, all right, enough. That's me rambling. Thank you for listening.